So we just finished up our message, part one of Should Christianity Be Sold? So I want to open it up now for discussions, questions, comments, concerns from everyone that had an opportunity to hear, to make sure that we have some good understanding about what we just covered. So I'm going to open it up and you guys can dive in. Don't be shy.
Thank you, brother. Jeff, that was interesting teaching, man. And I think one of the key points that you made that I need to still validate is the Christianity comes from a hybrid of two words, Christos and Anos, and you gave strong numbers for each of those, Christos and Anos, as being two separate words hybrided together to assimilate the understanding that an anointed evil, was the crux of what they were actually being called. And, despite the fact that they were being called that, that they were to press forward just like they would if they were being called thieves and murderers and such. And, it fits into the scripture, to be put alongside those other kind of accusations. So, personally, I've always attacked this from a different angle. I don't even deal with the fact that Christ or Christos, if you ask most people to name another Christ, most people would be stupefied to name another Christ. I would even ask those on the call if they would consider to themselves to name another Christ, another one called by that title. And there are others, because the word was in use before the coming of Yeshua. And one of those, I'll share this one of those were a man named Serapis. And Serapis didn't actually exist, but he was an amalgamation, a super god put together by Ptolemy, and Ptolemy is spelled with a silent P at the front. I say Ptolemy because I'm uneducated that way. But anyway, so Ptolemy put together this super god called Serapis, S-E-R-A-P-I-S, which is a hybrid again of two words, Osiris and Apis. And so he put together this Serapis, and he was called Christos Serapis. And he was started about 300 years before the coming of Yeshua, and his cult or his following was still in existence at the time of Yeshua. And so they were called the followers of that Christ. And history has recorded that there were clashes and conflicts between the two groups because they were both called Christianos, or Christians, or followers of Christ, or bishops of Christ. And then finally, when the Roman Empire took legalized their new brand of Christianity that they intended to sell, they squashed or killed off the remaining followers of Serapis, so that there would only be one Christiano, or one Christ. So that whole theology of a Christian, from its inception all the way until the very end of what the brothers pointed out through Scripture, is validated as something that has no validity towards our Bible. But we see it in our Bible because over in John chapter 1 verse 41, it says, "We have found the Messiah," which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew word Messiah. It says, which is being interpreted the Christ. And that interpretation or that translation was to match the Greek version of the New Testament. And from that point forward, you never seen the word Messiah used again, which is the Greek form of Messiah. But we know him to be the Messiah. So I just want to put that on the table for the family as well.
Great feedback, and great information that can be added. Anyone else have anything, any comments, questions, or concerns? I know this is can be a sensitive topic for people that have called themselves in the past, or may still call themselves Christians, and this is the time to really get that out, because if there's some questions or concerns, and not even if it's for you, but maybe it's for others that you may be talking with, then please share if there were some things that were not clear.
Yeah, Brother Jeff, like Brother Gray, I think, it was a very interesting, message. I thank you, Brother Gray, for adding that additional color and additional historic perspective, man. From somebody who claims to be uneducated, you sure find some nuggets to share. So that was great, and I think initially I wanted to go to the point of well, if the derogatory term, that this is not discounting the definition that you gave of Christians, which like Brother Greg, I need to do some more research on, but not discounting that piece, that derogatory term that Agrippa and the other Gentiles use, for the disciples. I look at that as, wouldn't that be, some kind of badge of courage that for unbelievers to have, a badge of honor rather, that for unbelievers to actually, deride actual believers and then give them, that name, that would be some type of badge of honor, because of, them upholding their beliefs, and their beliefs specifically in the Messiah. So that was the only question I had around the proliferation of Christian and Christianity.
So I'll and if somebody else wants to chime in and deal with that, and follow up with what I'm going to say. But the point of that is that, again, we start comparing apples to oranges. What Yeshua was saying has nothing to do with badges of honor. He was basically talking facts. The fact is that name was not, and as Brother Gregory gave some further color to that name was not, again, we said that they called themselves disciples. So, if somebody were just to come along and, your name is Dean, and all of a sudden they want to start calling you Harry, and, and it's really, if that's what they choose to do, it's really nothing that you can do about it. But is it something then that I say, okay, well, it's a badge of honor that, yeah, man, you just let them call you Harry? Like, no, my name is Dean. I mean, if you want to keep calling me that, that's fine, but my name is Dean. And so that's really what Yeshua was saying. It's like, if they call you that, then, don't be ashamed by it, because it's not anything that you can do about it. But that doesn't mean that you fall into that trapping of being called something by somebody else that, they just renamed you. So I think that, again, because I think that's one of the things that people will try and do to, what's the word I'm looking for, to try to get off track, in the sense that really what we're talking about here is what that name really means. And again, as we gave the examples, that it's only used 3 times. If that was so significant that Paul wanted to be called a Christian, like we pointed out, he had the perfect opportunity. He was in front of the king, Agrippa. He was in front of the governor of Rome for that region, and all of the court that was there, and he could have just made that statement, but he didn't, because they weren't Christians, because, again, that name has a derogatory connotation to it. As a matter of fact, even the Vine's Expository Dictionary pointed out it was a name of scorn. I mean, it was a name to, it would be much like people today calling people of color the N-word. So, I mean, it's nothing you can do about it, but that's never going to be a badge of honor to just say, well, yeah, I'm an N-word. That's never going to be a badge of honor, because it's a name of scorn. And so that's the same way that that word Christian is used. So again, that's my take on it. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but if somebody else wants to piggyback on that, they can.
No, I think that answers the question perfectly, and really sets me up for my next question is, if you call me that, then I'm going to use the opportunity to tell you that you call me out my name. Right. Paul did not. He did not use that opportunity to say, no, I'm not a Christian, right? Let's address that first, right? I'm not a Christian. No, he kind of walked around it and wholesalely did not address that piece that I'm not a Christian. Just as you said that he could have leaned into it and said, no, that's what I am. He also, if you call me outside my name, I'm also going to lean into, hey, look, let's address that piece first, right? This is my name, and then let's talk about, the other matters at hand. So that was a lead-in to my to my follow-up question is that why didn't he leverage it? And none of us know, because none of us were there. But the fact that he did not address that directly kind of leaves that open to whether he went along with the program as a Christian or from that with that moniker or not.
So let me address that scripturally. I think the scripture does address it. If you remember in Acts 11, chapter 26, it says that, he and Barnabas had been in Antioch for a year, where they were first called Christians. So this is something that, they just keep calling them. They just keep calling them that. And so, again, I think that when you really look at Scripture, does Paul, and again, people may take different approaches about it, but I'm just saying, but I think the Scripture does give us some insight into that. So Paul had been called this for a long period of time, this Christian, by the people in Antioch. So again, going to, talk with the king and the governor and stuff. I mean, this is nothing new. And I'm sure that at some point in time, I keep saying that's not my name. I mean, I'm just now telling, he just basically did tell them that I wish that all would be like me. And so again, if we go back to the original definition in Acts chapter 11, verse 26, it says that the disciples were called. So he's like, you can call me whatever, but actually I wish you were like me. So again, I'll go back to the N-word. Somebody can call you an N-word, but actually they could be actually in a much worse state than you. And you can actually say, well, yeah, I really wish that you were. I wish that you were really like me. Because again, I'm not the N-word. I'm an educated, person, with status and, finances and all of that kind of stuff. And really, you calling me the N-word, I really wish that you were like me. So, again, I understand where you're going. He didn't just flat out make that statement. But again, I think Scripture gives us some lead in that it says that he was in Antioch for a year. So again, I mean, it's back and forth, and at some point, do you just quit arguing that point? And then he just basically just maybe even sarcastically said that, okay, that's what you call me, but actually I wish that you were like me. And so you wouldn't be a Christian, you would be a disciple. So I think it does give some leading. I think that's a great question, though, that you call out there. The other thing that I would add is that if in fact that was the case, because we know Paul wrote, what was it, 2/3 of the New Testament. And so even though he did not at that point say that he was not a Christian, if he really was a Christian, he had ample time to let people know that he was a Christian. But he never did. So again, I think the scripture does address your question, is that wasn't something that he told the line on.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, and I think that the larger point is, no matter what you call me, I want you to be like me.
Exactly.
Right, and so and I think that's the larger point. What's in the name? Nothing.
Yep.
Right. What's in that name?
But he's been making that argument, I'm sure, for a year already.
It's not, but but I also look at it, the flip side is that now I'm at the highest level of leadership.
Exactly.
Right. But I'm at, so I want you to understand that this is not my name. So, right. So I use that opportunity to say, look, I'm at the highest level of leadership. Right. And, so I want you to know that that's not my name. He didn't choose to do that. But I think the larger point is that I don't care what you call me.
I agree.
You need to be more like me, right? And I think that's in spirit and in truth. Yep. And I think that's really the message.
Right.
It's really not around, in my opinion, right? It's not around, Christianity and you calling me Christian or whatever. No, your ways should be more aligned to my ways in terms of following my Father, keeping His commandments, right? That's it. If you love me, our Father says, you will keep my commandments.
Yep.
That's it. I don't care what you call me. It's not important, right?
Yep.
Do you keep His commandments? That's all that's important. And the fact that, Paul didn't really debate what they called him, and I think you even alluded to it, but look, he had been to that point. There may have been some back and forth, etc., over the course of that year. I'm just not going to take issue with that point. But what I'm really going to focus on is my belief system, me following the Messiah, me keeping my Father's Elohim's commandments. And that's the important point that you should take away. I think that's the important point we all should take away and not get hung up on the name and what people call us and what some, call themselves either errantly or not.
Well, the only thing that I would, go back on is that, but Paul did not ever call himself a Christian. So, I mean, again, and because people don't understand, I mean, and that's been something that's just been indoctrinated to people. I get it. I'm not trying to poke at anybody because of that. But what I do want us to understand, again, as you grow and move from just knowing to understanding, I think that we cannot, overlook the fact Paul nor any other of the disciples, any of the believers, the followers, never called themselves Christians. They never called themselves Christians. So that's the whole point here, because again, I think when we get to part 2, and we're talking about should Christianity be sold, that is really important because, and I don't want to give away the part 2, but in order to sell something, it has to have a tag. So if you don't ever have that tag, you can't sell it. So we can't overlook the fact, we can't just let that go, that Paul nor any of the other disciples, nor Yeshua, nor the Most High, they were never instructed to call themselves Christians. I gotta make sure that we get that, though. Now, if you call yourself that, and it's out of ignorance or whatever, I mean, okay, it's no harm, no foul with me. But I got to get that point across because it's going to deal. We're going to see that next Shabbat when we cover part 2 about should Christianity be sold. In order to sell something, you've got to have a tagline.
Yeah, and I think, I want to make the distinction between what I think that's a great point. What you call yourselves versus what other people call you, right? And so as it relates to what other people call you, just be like I am, following my Father's commandments. I don't care what you call me.
Right.
Now, what you call yourselves and identify yourselves is the point that you really address. And I think based off of based off the first piece, I didn't really understand, should you call yourself Christian? I didn't see it off that first piece. You may not because your name is, something else, disciple, but, that's neither here nor there. But the second piece that we talked about in terms of that definition of Christian will be absolutely the reason you would not want to even call yourself or be associated with Christian. Based on the origin of the name and what it actually means. I think that twist that you put on that cliffhanger you put on there at the end in terms of, the Christianity actually following the Antichrist, right? That's the pull for the next Shabbat. But also the very reason why you wouldn't want to be associated with that name. So I get that the two distinct pieces. So I wanted to lay down that demark, from what people call you to versus what you identify with. And I think that's a very accurate, point that the disciples and apostles never identified with, being Christians, that they were in fact disciples, believers, and apostles.
Right. And so that's one of the things, like I said, I pointed out at the very beginning. It's a 2-part message. There's 2 distinct parts. So to this part was just identifying, and so because you need to really understand this piece, because if you don't really understand this piece, then the second piece really won't be as meaningful. But if you really understand the history and the origin of Christians and Christianity and all of that, then now when we get into the selling piece of it, and what's actually being taken place today about those that call themselves Christians and the things that they're doing, understanding it's the follower of an unholy Messiah, now I think that you'll be able to put the dots together a lot easier. So that's why this is a 2-part message. So first I didn't want to combine them and try to talk about, no, let's just get this and let's let this marinate. And then we'll come back next Shabbat, and then we're going to actually, with that already marinated now we're going to really talk about the selling and what's actually going on with people being recruited to be Christians. Got to eat an elephant one bite at a time. Got to eat an elephant one bite at a time. Yeah, but great feedback, great comment. Any other comments, questions, concerns?
The inclusion of the fact Seraphis Christos gave more insight on where or why these Gentiles would tag them to an existing religion, because I didn't know that was something there in the Greek mythology, that they had a god named that, and he was also addressed as Christos, and how they related. So because when you quote all these verses and then Christ and Christians seems like it's working fine, it tags along, but when you give the background on how they adopted a pagan religion, which was in existence even before Yeshua was born, it is like more realistic or more fact-oriented one where you can tag and say that was existing one. That is why they called it. It's not because Gentiles just gave a nickname to Christ followers as Christians. So that was good, I thought.
I agree. I mean, and you know, as Brother Gregory Aki has shared, made the statement, which I think is which is a great statement, is that, you know, the truth of the Scripture should not be afraid of history or science, because it's only gonna give it more validation. And so I think that, you know, what Brother Gregory Aki Gregory shared, it only just amplifies the scriptural understanding. And we're going to talk some more again in part 2. We're going to deal some more in part 2 with that whole Christian and did they acknowledge it, and when did they start acknowledging it? Because at some point they did start acknowledging. So we're going to get in. That's that whole selling piece. But I agree that, you know, there are other pieces and other factors that give more credibility to what was going on. So I appreciate Keith, Brother Gregory, sharing that.
Well, you're welcome, my brother and sister. And Brother Jeff, I wanted to go back on something that Dean had made a statement, and I thought he brought out some really excellent viewpoints when he was giving his, you know, perspective. And I want us to be crystal clear about the importance of names in Scripture. You know, I know that the world has said a rose by any name is still a rose. It doesn't change its smell, and I get that point. But here in Scripture, as I read Revelations 13, and, you know, I like to read it because y'all don't trust me like that, so I'll go ahead and read it for you. And it says, and you know, reading in Revelations 13:16, it says, He causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man can buy or sell save he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. And so here we start to see either a mark or a name being used here. And then it goes forward to talk about counting the number of the beast. So this has been interpreted wildly throughout different schools of thought as to exactly what is the mark of the beast. Is it a chip? Is it the vaccine shot that they're giving people is the mark? Or is it the name of some religious body? And I tend to believe, because the beast's idea was to create an image for the world to worship after, I would think that it has more to do with the religious philosophy and the religious belief. But the Scriptures are pelted and peppered all throughout the Scriptures with the idea that a name represents a character, and it represents a connection. And being baptized, you're supposed to be baptized into a name as well. So names in Scriptures, you know, it says there's only one name given under heaven whereby all men must be saved. And yet, when I talk to people about that very Scripture, only one name given, name from heaven itself, when I talk to them about that and I show them the historical changes to the name that has taken place every 400 years or so, and how the name has amalgamated to where we are today, I'm often told that, you know, does it matter? Does a name matter? But I say, well, you know, there's been books written, there's been songs written, songs sung, you know, about the power of the name. And so, and when, you know, once we get into the nuts and bolts, the historical truth, now all of a sudden there's no power in the name? How is that possible? So I just want us to be mindful that when your back is against the wall, the name that you call is going to matter.
Yeah, great point. Great point. Well said. That the name is important and significant, and as Brother Dean pointed out, I mean, and that's what you're calling. It ain't what somebody else is calling, because you can't change what somebody else calls you or says about you. But that's a great point about so that name that you're calling for in the time of trouble, in the time that you need, that's the name that you're calling out. So that's significant. So yeah, great. That's a great point. It's a great point.
Sounds like, Brother Greg, you should give a message on that, on that name.
I think I just did, Brother Dean. I think I just did. That's all you need. Hour-long Jeff speech.
Hey, well, you went around it because you ain't named no names, right? So.
All right.
Put in the work. Put in the work.
Right? I want to get right to the heart of the matter.
Well, there's so many scriptures, man. I have to take a full half a day just to do it.
Right.
But no, that's a great point. I mean, when people, and that's kind of like you really brought it a little more succinct, like when Brother Dean asked the first question about, well, he really didn't say it, he really didn't do it. I mean, but there is some significance that he didn't just do it. I mean, there's something to that he had the opportunity, but he didn't do it. And I think so that name, it does have meaning, because he didn't go so far as to say, I am. And even King Agrippa wouldn't go so far as to say that he was. I mean, so even though he was compelled, he's like, you almost persuaded me, like based on what you said, it almost sounded like I should be called. But he wouldn't go that far. So I think that is a very valid point that you call out, that a name is significant. It is significant. And especially if it's just arbitrarily changed. Because there's enough information, I think, both in the scripture as well as outside the scripture, to show that what that name actually means, what that name is. And so if you just say, well, no, it's just this, then that's very negligent, very negligent.
There's a historical letter by a guy named Herodias, and he was talking about the conflicts between the two sects that were being called Christians, and how they would have these confusions about what group was being spoken of, because they were calling both groups Christians. And so Serapis, the worship of Serapis was pretty widespread, because he was to be a god that bridged the African world, or the Egyptian world, and the Egyptian gods back to the Greek gods. And so they made into Serapis this super god who would rule the underworld, and many of the attributes that are attributed to the greatest gods was given to him to make him like the best god ever. And so a lot of people were, through selling of that brand of Christianity, was pushed into it. But Ptolemy literally just made this guy up. I mean, he just, he created him. He said he existed. This is who they needed to pray to. And, gave him an identity. And, hundreds of years later, people were for real about that thing. I mean, this is not, they were honestly, sincerely worshiping this guy, this Christ. And so when there was clashes and confusion between the two groups, because they began to call the other group, the original, those that followed Yeshua, knew well that was a false Christ, that was a false title, and it wasn't something that they took honor in historically, because they knew it was wrong. Yeah.
Well, it's much like the so-called cross that Yeshua was hung on, and that anybody that was of the children of Israel. That's why, actually, I think it's in Matthew, actually, it calls it the stake. That he was put on a stake, because actually that cross was symbolic of the god, was it,
Tammuz.
Tammuz. And, because that T, that actually represented him. And so it's no way that they would have put him on that, because, again, people knew. They understood in that day the things that were going on. And because we don't know, and, again, that's why the question that I left open-ended, and we'll get a little bit more into it, a lot more into it next Shabbat, on the religious church leaders. And did they just not know, or is this intentional? Because, again, if you wanted a church leader, you should know this information. That, it's no way that they would have put, Yeshua, the Son of the Most High, on a cross representing Tammuz, some pagan god. It's no way they would have done that. So, again, for these myths, these misrepresentations to be shared with people, it really, to me, like I said, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. It doesn't bode well for the people that call themselves the religious church leaders.
Mm. And you see that little T on all the buildings around people's necks?
Yeah.
That little T done made its way around the world.
Yeah. So good stuff. So again, like to Sister Rachel's point, when you bring in the, not only scriptural but historical facts about certain things, it adds more credence and revelation to, what we're speaking of.
I have a question. So this is all truth, and I am learning it for the first time, but this is all truth in existence. So there should be people who already know this and who's already following it and living. How do you find them? See, if I want to find a Christian, I can go and search for churches. I find them. If I want to find a Hindu, I can find a Hindu group or a center of worship, whatever that is. But how do you find us, or like-minded people who are believing this truth and who are walking in that walk? I certainly don't believe that this just happened today, right? This should have been in existence long time back, and there should be some group of people who already follow. How do you find, and how do you get to know them?
We're the only group. That's it. So I don't know why you think there has to be others. So pretty much me. And then I met Jeff, and then, Jeff's been doing some work, and then I'd be feeding Jeff behind the scenes. And we fight sometimes. Y'all don't know that we fight sometimes, but we do. And sometimes I win, sometimes he wins, but we're still trying to get the belt. Who's going to hold the crown? We don't know yet. But this is it, Rachel. So if you leave this, there's nowhere else to go. That's cultish. I'm just joking. Go ahead, Brother Jeff. I'll let you answer her. Actually, Sister Rachel, there's a lot of brothers and sisters that's even further down the line than we are. And it's important that we come to that reality, because, just like we're studying a little bit deeper than you may get at your church, there are people that live and study deeper, and their lives are more evolved than ours are in terms of how they live, how they interact, how they eat, how they dress, how they're more advanced. And so until you get to that reality that you're somewhere on a narrow road, but there's those that are ahead of you on the road and those that are behind you. And so be respectful of those that have sacrificed to be ahead, and be kind towards those who have not yet and that are coming behind you. Just to understand that, it's a long, narrow road, and there's a lot of folk on it. And you'll meet them now that you know what to look for. When you didn't know what to look for, you were unaware.
Yeah, well, I think Brother Gregory pretty much answered it. I think the key, the only thing that I think that I would add to that is, first, as the Most High says that, if you seek, you shall find. And I think that what you're seeking is important. Again, going back to what Brother Gregory said about a name, is very important. So if you're seeking, to follow after God in the way that you've been indoctrinated, or the world, I should say, has been indoctrinated for the most part, as a Christian, this is what you look for. Okay, got a good Sunday worship, got a good choir, so then you'll find those. But I think the same way as if you're really truly seeking to find people that are truly interested in understanding the truth, and not just understanding the truth, but then following and living out that truth, then I think and I think it's kind of evident that even though this group may be small, that, it happens because, each one of us, we met through really kind of, bizarre kind of circumstances. But again, I think that that's the real key, is that, you truly are seeking to find that, because, the Most High has as many people as Brother Gregory shared, that are already doing this, and, some actually with communities that are living out the true scriptural years by the days, and following all of the feast days. I mean, so again, they're there, and it's just, again, I always believe that we need to be working on ourselves. So again, as you continue to work on yourself and continue to grow, then He'll give you at that point in time, and He'll introduce you to and lead you to the other people that can take you to the next step. But I think they're there. But as my brother Dean always says, is that, troublesome is the way, and help me out, Dean. And narrow is the road.
Narrow is the path, and troublesome is the way, and few be there that find.
Yeah.
Right.
So
you ain't. Right. Go ahead.
No, hold that thought, Dean. But I just want to say, I want you to finish what you're saying. But I just want to say, there are people there, but at the same time, it's not an abundance of people, though. I mean, as Brother Dean just said, that there's a limited number. There's a lot. I'm not saying that there's not a lot of people, but it's not like trying to find a church or something like that, or a Hindu or something like that. Go ahead, Brother Dean.
No. I think you covered it. You're always going to find more people doing wrong than doing right. Right. That's in anything, right? And but they are out there, Sister Rachel. I know, my wife has met one actually on the job where, we talked to, they got into a discussion about, ministry, and, he had a ministry, the same thing, right? Teaching, honoring the feast days. Brother Jeff has come across some that have hit the website saying, no, this is, I think it was during the feast of unleavened bread, or during the Passover, when our Passover wasn't aligned to what the Jewish, right, and I got my air quotes up, right, Passover date was, and that's because, they don't bring in the new year on the right date, right? And so, but someone had commented and saying, no, this is the Passover. So you'll come across them, Sister Rachel, again, to Brother Jeff's point, now you know what you're looking for. And you may, and I even think Sister Sybil had come across, a website or something where the people in the past where, they were keeping the Shabbat and following the feast days. So you may even come across some on the web like you do with Christianity and Hinduism, etc. But again, it's going to be fewer than those people that are along those mainstream religions. So I just wanted to give you some real life examples of us coming across them in in different venues and activity.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So no, like I said, this is all good stuff. I mean, I really I'm really ready. Like I said, for next week we'll put the pieces together, and I think it'll really come to full light about the selling of Christianity. Because again, we understand Christianity, and I mean, I think the fact that so many things that we covered today, and hopefully we'll get a chance to marinate on that, is that they just were original. They were called the disciples, and then it says they were first called Christians in Antioch. And if we understand that city, they said that the biggest wall by the time Paul and Barnabas got there was that between the Jews and the Gentiles. So that would have been the Jews, the wall that separated them and the Romans and the Greeks, because of what was going on there. And what else is significant is that, and I again, there's so much to cover, but I don't want us to miss this, and I'll have to somehow loop this back in. But to be called a Christian was only those people that were following Yeshua. So that doesn't mean all the Israelites. It was a select group of people that were called that, because again, as King Agrippa said, it's like, I'm not a Jew. But both Paul and Agrippa were of the lineage of Israel. So again, when you look at that Christian term, I mean, it really is people that were following what Yeshua was telling them to do. And then to take that today and to say, even if, again, for laughs and giggles, like Brother Dean was saying, well, it could have been a badge of courage, whatever, but, they're so far off from what the original people that would have been called Christians were doing. Now they truly are Christians, and that's the play on words. And I don't know if I really set that up right in there, but I mean, I kind of ended with that, is that really the people that call themselves Christians, they're more aligned to following the secular Messiah. So they really are Christians, because they really are following an unholy Messiah. It's almost like, if you say something long enough, it's almost what do you say? You actually bring it to
self-fulfilling prophecy.
Self-fulfilling prophecy. Thank you. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, and that really is the play on the words here. That's really what it's become, because they truly are the people that call themselves Christians. Sadly, and I'm not picking up because they don't know any better, but they are Christians because they really are following an unholy Messiah. So again, I mean, the understanding, we'll get some more into that. I'm going to talk some more about even that term, the Christians, and some other things that I think need to be clarified with that whole, from the Israel to the Jews to the Christians. I mean, that we really understand who's being talked about and why those terms and stuff are being used. So we'll get some more into the detail of that. But this has been great feedback. We'll put this out there, and hopefully this will shed some light on any questions that anybody else would have had on Should Christianity Be Sold, Part 1. Are there any other comments before we end our recording?
Yeah, there's one, and I want to point out in the Sefer, right, that Acts 26, verse 27, or verse 28 rather, says, then Agrippa said unto Paul, you almost persuade me to be a Netissary, right? So which is translated to Nazarene versus Christian, which is probably more accurate than the word Christian in the King James Bible, because that was a very derogatory term. They said it about Yeshua, right? Well, he just, how can someone great come out of, isn't he a Nazarene, right? Right. And so that's more consistent with the teaching and with the scripture than that Christian just thrown in there. So I just want to point that out, that may, that this may be closer transliteration of the actual word versus Christian in the King James.
Okay, yeah, I have to look into that. Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. Okay. Well, anybody else have any further comments, questions, or concerns? Okay, well, we'll end this recording, and we will pick back up next week with Should Christianity Be Sold? Part 2.